You ever notice how people walk around pretending they're made of stone, until suddenly they're not? Somewhere out there, right now, someone is sitting with their head down, eyes burning, chest tight, and your name tangled up in every breath they take. Funny, isn't it? How you can be living your day, scrolling, walking, breathing like nothing's happened, while in some quiet corner of the world, someone is falling apart because of you, not because you hurt them on purpose, not because you're some monster in their story, but because you mattered more than they expected. So you want to know why your absence hits harder than your presence ever did? Well, sit with that for a moment, because it's a funny little truth people hardly ever admit. When you're around, they get used to you, your voice, your habits, your little quirks that nobody else seems to have. They start treating those things like background noise, like furniture that's always been there and always will be. But the second you step away, that's when everything you ever were to them comes rushing back louder than you ever sounded in the room. It's almost poetic, the way people realize your value only when they're left with the echo instead of the real thing. It's strange, isn't it? People mistake familiarity for permanence. They think because you've been there, you'll stay there. They grow comfortable, maybe even careless. They stop noticing the way you held them together in quiet ways, the way your presence had this weird power to calm storms they never told you about. But once you're gone, once the space you filled becomes a silence, they start hearing all the things they ignored. The way you laughed, the way you listened, the way you made them feel like the world wasn't as cruel as it usually is. Suddenly, everything you brought into their life becomes painfully clear, like a spotlight on a stage they thought was empty. And that's the thing, presence is soft, warm, a little too easy to overlook. But absence is sharp. It cuts, it presses on every tender part they pretended didn't exist. That emptiness you leave behind becomes a mirror, forcing them to see what you were worth, not in theory, not in whispers, just in raw, undeniable truth. And the truth is never gentle. The truth stings. It makes people wake up in the middle of the night, feeling the weight of all the things they never said, never appreciated, never believed they'd miss. It turns memories into reminders, reminders into aches, and aches into tears. And here's the funny twist: your absence isn't loud because you were flawless. No, it's loud because you were real. Real in ways they didn't understand until you weren't there to hand it to them anymore. People think value comes from perfection, but it doesn't. It comes from presence, your energy, your honesty, your peculiar way of fitting into their life like a missing puzzle piece. When you leave, they realize that no one else quite clicks into that shape the way you did. No substitute, no distraction, no rebound can recreate what you brought. And when people can't replace you, they feel every inch of the void you leave behind. Maybe you think you didn't matter. Maybe you think they moved on without a second thought. But listen closely. People don't break over strangers. They don't lose sleep over someone who had no impact. If someone out there is hurting because you're not around, it means your presence wasn't just noticed, it was woven into their life. You became part of their routine, their comfort, their emotional map. When you stepped away, that map folded, leaving them wandering without direction. That's the power of absence. It exposes everything presence hides, you see. People rarely know the value of what they have while they have it. It's a human flaw, a habit, a blind spot. They assume time is abundant, that connections are replaceable, that you'll stick around no matter what. So they don't look closely. They don't appreciate deeply. They don't cherish while they still can. And then suddenly, one day, the seat across from them is empty. The phone doesn't ring. The messages stop coming. And they feel something they didn't expect: loss. A loss shaped exactly like you. Your absence is a message they can't ignore, a lesson delivered in silence. It teaches them more about you than your presence ever did. Funny how that works. You walk away, and suddenly the world rearranges itself around the space you left behind. They start replaying moments, dissecting words, wishing they'd paid attention sooner. They realize your presence was the quiet stability in a world that constantly pulls people apart. And without you, everything feels a little colder, a little sharper, a little heavier. Your absence hits harder because it forces people to confront the truth. You mattered more than they ever admitted aloud. People don't just break down over nothing, you know. They don't sit there with trembling hands and wet eyelashes because they're bored. No. People only fall apart over those who left a mark, those who crawled under their skin without even trying. And you, whether you see it or not, carved your initials somewhere in someone's mind. Maybe without intention, maybe without awareness, but you did. That's the thing about impact. It doesn't ask for permission. It just happens. A word you said, a moment you shared, a tiny fragment of you they held on to. And while you're busy thinking you walked through their life like a ghost, they're out there piecing themselves back together because your absence ripped through their emotional walls like a cold wind. They never prepared for people break over those who carried meaning, even if the meaning wasn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet presence that does the most damage when it's gone. You might have been the calm in their chaos without realizing it. You might have been the first person who made them feel seen in a world full of blind faces. Or maybe you were simply a reminder of something they lost long before you came along: hope, warmth, the idea that someone could understand them without them having to explain every fractured thought. Whatever you represented, it stuck. You stuck. That's why they're breaking now. And the beautiful, twisted part is, people never cry over what they don't care about. No one sheds tears over someone who meant nothing. No one aches at night replaying moments with a stranger. Pain is selective. It has preferences. It only settles in the spaces where something real once lived. So if someone is crying over you right now, it means you left behind more than just memories. You left fingerprints, emotional fingerprints they can't scrub off, no matter how angry, embarrassed, or confused they are. People like to pretend they're strong. They mask their emotions, put on their brave faces, walk around with their chin up. But grief, emotional grief, cracks through all of that. It doesn't ask if the time is convenient. It doesn't wait for privacy. It just floods them unexpectedly, in grocery aisles, in parked cars, in dark bedrooms. And when it does, the truth spills out. You mattered. You mattered in a way they didn't fully understand until now. It's almost comical how humans need loss to recognize value, like they need silence to appreciate a voice, or distance to understand closeness. Think about the idea that someone might be holding their face in their hands right now because the thought of you feels heavy. Your laugh might still be echoing in their mind. Your absence might be sitting beside them like an unwanted shadow. They might be replaying every conversation, wondering what they could have done differently, or why someone like you had such a hold on them. You might think you didn't give them much, but to them, maybe you gave everything they'd been starved for. A moment of comfort, a sense of belonging, a piece of peace in a world that rarely offers any. And the irony, you probably don't even realize your impact. You walk around thinking you blended in, thinking you were forgettable. Yet there they are, struggling with the weight of losing something they never thought they'd lose. That's how influence works. It's invisible until it's gone. Your presence might have felt small to you, but in their world, it was something like light. Not a blinding spotlight, no. That's too dramatic. More like a lamp in a dark, cluttered room. Something that made things feel less overwhelming, less impossible. And when that light goes out, the darkness comes back twice as strong. People break over those who touch them in ways they can't explain. Not because of perfection, not because of grand gestures, but because something about you hit them in a place that rarely gets touched. A place they protect. A place they don't show to just anyone. And once someone reaches that place, losing them feels like losing a part of themselves. So if someone is crying over you right now, it's not a sign of your cruelty or their weakness. It's proof that your existence wasn't just another passing moment in their timeline. It was a chapter one they weren't ready to close. You know, people love to pretend they're so calm, so untouched, so perfectly put together. But the moment tears start falling, everything they tried to hide comes spilling out with them. And that's the funny thing about tears, they're honest. Brutally, painfully honest. They don't lie. They don't negotiate. They don't wear masks the way people do. Tears only show up when something inside gets too heavy to carry. And if someone's tears are tied to you, it means you weren't just a passing character in their story. You were a weight, a memory, a feeling they couldn't shake off, no matter how hard they tried. People think crying is some sort of weakness, some embarrassing accident that must be wiped away before anyone notices. But the truth, tears reveal what words refuse to admit. They expose how much someone was holding in, how much they cared, how deeply something or someone got to them. And if that someone happens to be you, well, that says something, doesn't it? It says you walked into their life and touched a part of them they tried to keep locked away. Maybe you didn't ask to, maybe you didn't even notice, but you did. And now those tears are the evidence you see. Tears don't fall for just any reason. They fall for meaning, for connection, for the moments that hit too close to the heart. Someone crying over you means you occupied a space in their mind that wasn't meant for just anyone. Maybe you were their comfort, their escape, their reason to breathe a little easier. Or maybe you were the one thing they thought was safe, permanent, steady. And then something changed. Maybe you left. Maybe they lost you. Maybe life just pulled you in a different direction. Whatever the reason, the absence created a pressure they couldn't hold back anymore. It's strange how a single tear can carry the weight of a whole story. A story they never told you. A story they hoped would end differently. Their tears might be filled with regret, or longing, or confusion, or that quiet ache that only shows up when reality doesn't match the dream they had in their head. They might be mourning what could have been, or what used to be, or what they hoped you'd be. And while you're here wondering if you ever mattered at all, they're somewhere replaying every moment with you like it's the only movie that ever made sense. And the funniest part, tears don't fall for perfection. No one cries over someone who was flawless. They cry over someone who felt real, real enough to hurt them, real enough to matter, real enough to leave a bruise on the inside, the kind that doesn't show on the skin but throbs quietly every time they see something that reminds them of you. A song, a place, a smell, a memory that refuses to fade. Just because time has passed, people cry when their heart recognizes something their mind tries to deny. They cry when a connection snaps, when hope slips through their fingers, when someone who mattered becomes someone they can't reach anymore. Maybe they didn't expect to react this way. Maybe they thought they were stronger, colder, smarter. Maybe they thought they were done with emotions like this. But you walked into their life and rewired something. You made them believe in something, even if they never said it out loud. And now the loss of that belief stings in a way they can't explain to anyone, not even themselves. And don't underestimate what it means that they're crying over you. Not the past, not the future, not some imaginary fantasy. You, the real version of you, with your flaws and your sharp edges and your uncertainty. Something about you dug deep enough to trigger a reaction they couldn't control. That's not weakness. That's impact. And impact is rare. It's messy. It's inconvenient. But it's real. Their tears are telling a story you'll probably never hear directly. People don't always confess their heartbreak. They just feel it, quietly, alone. They let the tears fall and hope no one sees. But in those hidden moments, one truth becomes undeniable. You were significant. Significant enough to stir emotions they tried so hard to bury. Significant enough that losing you, or missing you, or remembering you hurt. In a way they can't laugh off or shrug away. Tears don't fall without meaning. And if someone's crying over you right now, it's because the meaning you brought into their life was stronger than they ever expected. Type of love. To imagine that pain is always intentional, that if someone is hurting because of you, it must mean you did something cruel, sharp, deliberate. But that's not how it works, not really. Sometimes your mere existence stirs something in someone else, something they weren't prepared to feel. And when that feeling grows too loud, too heavy, too tangled, they break not because you aimed to break them, but because your impact slipped through the cracks of their defenses and settled somewhere deep. Someone's pain can be proof you mattered. Even if you never meant to matter at all. Isn't it strange how you can walk through someone's life with soft steps, careful hands, gentle intention, and still leave footprints that shake their whole emotional foundation. People like to pretend they're unshakable, like nothing affects them unless they grant permission. But you, without trying, without planning, became a part of someone's emotional structure, a beam holding up a corner of their world. And when something shifts, when you step back, or drift away, or simply stop showing up the way they expected, that corner collapses, and they feel the impact in places they didn't even know were fragile, and the irony is beautiful. In a twisted way, pain doesn't always come from betrayal or anger. Sometimes it comes from gratitude, from remembering how safe you made them feel, how seen, how understood, and suddenly that comfort is gone, leaving behind a hollow space where something warm used to be. They're not crying because you wounded them intentionally. They're crying because they can't recreate the feeling you gave them with anyone else. That kind of irreplaceability has nothing to do with cruelty and everything to do with connection. Maybe you were the first person to listen without judgment. Maybe you were the only one who spoke to the version of them they kept hidden from the world. Maybe you carried their secrets without asking for anything in return. People think they'll be fine without that kind of presence until it's gone. Then reality hits them like a punch. No one else fits the shape you fit. No one else understands the way you understood. And suddenly they're sitting alone, trying to swallow emotions they swore they'd never feel again, and they'll tell themselves it's your fault. Humans do that. They blame the source of their comfort for becoming a source of their pain, even when the cause was nothing more than circumstance, timing, or inevitability. But the tears don't lie. Tears don't care about logic or blame or pride. Tears only know one truth. Something about you mattered so much that losing you hurts in ways they can't control. It's almost comedic how people pretend they're unaffected until their heart decides otherwise. Your intention never had to be harmful for their heart to react the way it is. You could have been kind, patient, gentle. You could have done everything right. But emotion isn't a machine. It doesn't follow rules or respect boundaries. Sometimes feelings grow where they're not supposed to. Sometimes attachment forms without warning, and when reality doesn't match the fantasy they built in their head, they shatter not because you tried to hurt them, but because they dreamed too hard in your direction. And isn't it something that your simple existence could change someone's emotional weather, that a single memory of you can warm them or ruin them depending on the day, that they can go from smiling at the thought of you to breaking down because you're no longer there to smile back? That's not malicious. That's impact. Pure, raw, uncontrollable impact. You weren't their storm, you were their calm. And when the calm disappears, the storm inside them takes over, flooding everything they thought they had under control. People cry over those who touch them deeply, even accidentally. They cry because their heart recognizes something their mind didn't prepare for. And if someone is hurting over you right now, it doesn't mean you're cruel. It means you were meaningful in a way neither of you expected. It means you left a space behind that wasn't meant to be empty. It means the version of you they carry inside them is one they can't just put down when it becomes inconvenient. Their pain is not a sign of your wrongdoing. It's a sign that your presence held weight they can still feel even now. Isn't it funny how memories work? How something as simple as the way you tilted your head, or the way your eyes softened when you listened, or the exact rhythm of your footsteps can stay trapped in someone's mind long after you're gone. People like to pretend they're so logical, so in control, but a single memory of you can hit them harder than a scream. Your voice might have been quiet, your presence subtle, but now, with that warning, the memories echo louder than anything you ever said out loud. It's almost cruel how the mind does that, cruel and poetic at the same time. You didn't ask to become a memory, but that's what you are now. And not just any memory, no. You're the kind that shows up uninvited, the kind that knocks on someone's heart when they're trying their hardest to feel nothing at all. Maybe they're walking past a place you once stood together. Maybe they hear a song you didn't even know they connected to you. Maybe they're staring at their ceiling, replaying a moment you've long forgotten. Meanwhile, in their head, that moment is alive, still breathing, still glowing, still whispering your name like it's the only word that matters. People underestimate the power of memories. They think distance kills emotion. They think time erases feelings. But memories ignore time. They ignore distance. They rise up whenever they want, dragging emotions with them like shadows. And the wild part, your presence might have been soft, gentle, barely noticeable to you, but the memory of you, that's the part that screams. That's the part that haunts. That's the part that refuses to fade into the background. And here's the twist: memories can hurt more than reality ever did. Reality is messy, unpredictable, full of flaws. But memories get polished. They get replayed. They get dressed up in emotions. Someone might be sitting right now remembering you not as you were, but as they needed you to be. More comforting, more kind, more special. They turned you into something bigger than the moment itself, something that feels irreplaceable. And now that you're gone, those memories hit them like a punch to the ribs that never saw coming. Your voice, even if you didn't speak much, left an imprint. Maybe it was the tone you used when you cared. Maybe the softness when you said their name. Maybe the silence you offered when they couldn't find the words. People don't forget that. Not when it felt rare. Not when it felt like a break from the noise of everything else. So now, when they think of you, their mind amplifies those memories because that's all they have left. And the echo grows louder each time they try to shut it out. The memory of you can be a comfort one moment and a wound the next. It depends on the day. Some days they remember you with a small smile, like a warm hand resting on their chest. Other days it hits like a cold wave, reminding them of every piece of you they can't have back. That duality, that unpredictability, that's what makes someone cry over a memory louder than they ever cried over the real thing. Because the real you was imperfect and human, but the memory of you, that's the version they built in the quiet moments, when no one was watching maybe. You didn't realize how deeply you were carving yourself into their mind. Maybe you were just being yourself, laughing, listening, looking at them in that way that made them feel a little more alive. But the brain is greedy. It stores these things. It stockpiles them. And when you disappear, the brain refuses to let go. It pushes the memories to the front, like a cruel slideshow that plays on repeat until their chest hurts from the weight of it. And don't forget how memories twist themselves around emotion. Someone could be crying right now, not because of something you said, but because of something you never got to say. Not because of something you did, but because of everything you almost did. Not because of who you were, but who they believed you could become in their life. Memories are never neutral. They're always tinted with love, regret, longing, hope, pain. And you, for them, carry all those shades at once. Your voice, your presence, your gesture. Things you barely thought about became emotional landmines in someone else's memory. And now, while you're living your life, they're out there wrestling with ghosts of moments that mattered more to them than you ever realized. They're not crying over nothing. They're crying because the memory of you speaks louder than your presence ever did. People walk around acting like they've got everything under control, like their emotions are neatly folded and tucked away somewhere safe. But the moment someone like you slips out of their world, their whole facade starts cracking. They don't want to admit it, of course. Admitting it would mean facing the truth that you weren't just a passerby, some ordinary shadow in the background. No, you were something that shook them, disrupted them, challenged the parts of themselves they pretend don't exist. Your presence did something to them, something they didn't ask for but secretly needed. And when you're gone, that disruption becomes a silence so loud it's almost unbearable. See, presence is a strange thing. It's not always about loud voices or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it's just the way you look at them, like you see a version of them they've never dared to show anyone. Sometimes it's your honesty, the way your words cut through their excuses and leave them exposed. Or maybe it's the way you didn't play their little games. You didn't flatter them, didn't chase them, didn't bend yourself into shapes to earn their approval. You treated them like someone real, and the more they tried to resist it, the more your presence seeped into the cracks of their carefully built mask. And that's what disrupts people: authenticity. Nothing shakes a person more than someone who doesn't buy their act. Most people spend their entire lives performing, pretending they're confident, pretending they're healed, pretending they don't care. Then someone like you walks in, someone who isn't fooled by the performance, someone who sees the tremble beneath the confidence, the ache behind the laughter. and suddenly they don't know what to do. They're exposed, vulnerable, seen. And being seen, that scares people more than anything, but it also attaches them to you. They won't admit it, but there's something addictive about someone who reflects your truth back at you. You become a kind of mirror they can't avoid. A mirror that doesn't lie. And when you're gone, that mirror disappears and they're forced to look at themselves through the distorted lenses of their fears again. That's why they cry, not just because they miss you, but because your presence changed the way they saw themselves. And now that you're not there, they're terrified of who they become. Without that clarity, you disrupted their emotional routine. And routines, people cling to them like lifelines. But you broke theirs without even trying. Maybe you showed them a softness they didn't know they craved. Maybe you challenged them in ways they never expected. Maybe your presence felt like a place they didn't know existed, a place where they didn't have to perform. And losing that place, even for a second, feels like losing a part of themselves. It leaves them unsettled, restless, unable to go back to the old version of themselves they once accepted so easily. And that's the thing, your presence didn't just disrupt them, it upgraded them. It stretched something inside them, widened something, illuminated something. And once someone sees themselves in a new light, they can't unsee it. They can't return to the dark without feeling like something precious is missing, something you awakened, something they didn't realize was sleeping. And that awakening hurts when the person who sparked it is no longer there. You affected their emotions in ways they don't even know how to articulate. They could try to distract themselves, bury their feelings, pretend nothing happened. But the disruption you caused isn't physical, it's psychological. It's emotional. It's internal. And internal impacts are the hardest to shake. They linger, they echo, they grow. They show up at inconvenient times, in quiet moments, in the middle of the night, in the middle of conversations, in the middle of pretending they're fine. You show up in their mind like an unfinished sentence they can't escape. And that's why someone out there is crying over you right now. Not because you hurt them on purpose, not because you did something wrong, but because your presence changed the rhythm of their emotional stability. You didn't fit into their usual patterns. You broke the monotony, the numbness, the predictable cycle of their relationships. And now, without you, everything feels off balance, tilted, incomplete. They don't know how to adjust. They don't want to adjust. People don't cry because you left them the same. They cry because you didn't. They cry because your presence reached deeper than they allowed anyone else to reach. They cry because you stirred something raw and real inside them, something they couldn't keep hidden anymore. And once someone feels that kind of disruption, there's no going back to normal. Normal feels too small, too distant, too empty. They're crying because your presence mattered more than they ever admitted. You know, it's funny how people treat emotional pain like it's some sort of invisible ghost that only haunts them. They walk around clutching their chests, wiping their eyes, wondering why the world didn't pause for their heartbreak. Meanwhile, someone out there is crying over you right now, and you don't even feel the temperature change. Isn't that deliciously strange? That we can be the center of someone's emotional earthquake and yet stand miles away, untouched, sipping our tea like nothing happened. The world really plays favorites with who gets to feel the fire and who gets to walk away without smelling like smoke. And the best part, most people have no idea what kind of power they hold simply because another person's tears carry their name. Think about it. Somewhere, maybe across a city, maybe across a street, maybe across a memory that still hasn't died, someone is breaking apart because of you. Maybe you left them. Maybe you disappointed them. Maybe you didn't even know you mattered that much. But the universe doesn't care about the details. Emotions don't need contracts to burn. The truth is, people rarely realize they've become someone else's unfinished story. They forget that their smallest actions can be someone else's unraveling. And oh, how easily we dismiss it. They'll be fine. They'll move on. They're dramatic. All these little excuses we whisper to escape the weight of responsibility. But responsibility doesn't disappear just because you refuse to look at it. There's a strange thrill in knowing that your absence can create such chaos. It's not cruelty, not exactly, more like a reminder of how deeply human connections can cut. And let's be honest, Most people love the idea of being important, but hate the idea of being accountable. They want to be adored, remembered, chased, cried over, but when the tears actually fall, they act surprised, like they didn't expect consequences for being someone worth missing. Isn't that twisted? Wanting the glory without the gravity, wanting the emotional spotlight without the emotional weight. But here's the real secret. If someone is crying over you right now, it says something about your story, your impact, your ability to stir someone's world enough that it trembles without you. People don't cry over wallpaper. They don't break down over background noise. Tears are reserved for things that mattered, things that left fingerprints on the soul. And whether you accept that or not, you've etched yourself into someone's emotional history. You become a reference point, a bruise they can't stop pressing because it reminds them they felt something real. The tragedy, though, is how often we walk away without learning anything from it. We shrug off their pain like dust on our shoulders, never stopping to ask why our presence mattered so much in the first place. Maybe you offered them something they'd been starving for: attention, warmth, validation, a sense of being seen. Maybe you pulled them out of a pit they thought they'd die in, then wandered off because you didn't realize you were holding their last lifeline. Or maybe, just maybe, they built you into something larger than life. You never asked for the pedestal, but you didn't step off it either. Oh, humans love their pedestals, right until they start to wobble. And while they cry, you continue living, unaware, uninterested. Not because you're heartless. No. It's simply that life doesn't grant everyone the same emotional schedule. One person mourns, while the other moves forward. One person rewinds the story, while the other has already started writing a sequel. Someone's midnight sorrow is another person's fresh morning. That's the twisted symmetry of human attachment. It never lines up the way people hope it will. But here's the part no one likes to admit. Their tears aren't just sadness. They're proof. Proof that you affected someone. Proof that your existence rippled out farther than you realized. Proof that emotions raw, messy, uncontrollable emotions still anchor people to one another, even when connections break. And isn't it strangely empowering that simply by being yourself, you could leave a mark deep enough to make someone cry long after the moment has passed? Not because you tried, not because you intended it, but because you mattered in ways neither of you fully understood.